Welcome to IAG's webcast called Selling Your Business, What Could Possibly Go Wrong. We're going to talk about those events that can go wrong while you're finding the right buyer, negotiating that deal, and then finally getting ready to close. We'll discover how deals get bogged down between going to market and getting that money wired, from seller's fatigue to all buyers are liars to the due diligence nightmare.
It is true. Every deal has bumps in the road. It's how you jump over these bumps that matter. We guide our clients through what can be a very bumpy, messy, once-in-a-lifetime ride. It can be a real high-stakes roller coaster with plenty of potholes. Our clients have typically run and built their company over many decades from the ground up and find themselves wanting to extract their wealth and transition their legacy. Basically, they want to cash out and take that dream vacation. The problem is that sellers typically don't have the experience, the bandwidth, or the trusted advisor to help guide them through this once-in-a-lifetime process. It is personal for me. I built my own company from the basement of my home over 15 years. I felt like I had built this engine. All I was doing was trying to feed the engine. By the end, I was exhausted. It was my time to extract my own wealth and transition to a new chapter. So I get the exhaustion, I get the wanting out, and the need for a guide.
IAG helps prepare our clients. We identify buyers, negotiate the transaction, and close the deal. We have guided our clients through successful sales hundreds of times, representing billions of dollars. I recall in one of our war room sessions, you talked about a deal that really stuck with us. It was about when you were putting Steve's pants on in the hospital to get him to the closing table and get his $30 million wired. That really symbolized that we'll do literally anything to get a deal done.
That one was not glamorous, but I will say Steve is okay today.
Consequently, our clients extract their wealth and transition their legacy, and hopefully they'll send us a postcard from their African safari.
It's my pleasure to introduce Jason Hollander, CEO of IAG, who grew up watching his father start this business 25 years ago. He has practically been negotiating deals since the age of 10, memorizing sales contracts and anything else that was necessary. Jason knows how to run a successful M&A firm. He understands the complexity, the trials, the solutions, and he's helped guide all of us through what it takes to sell a business. I liken him to an M&A superhero, but without the cape. Although I have seen you shopping online for one. I don't know that you realize that. Jason later saw the transition of IAG over the past year, selling hundreds of listings. If you're looking for somebody who knows M&A, you've come to the right spot.
And I'll say this about Joe Lieberman, Senior Managing Director of IAG. Joe brings both real-world experience, a wide variety of talents, all that are essential to pulling off some very challenging and complex transactions. He's accomplished this through successful exit of his own business, writing 2 books. They both sold out, I think, is an M&A subject matter expert and has guided many clients across a wide variety of industries.
I'll add that you have guided IAG through the winning of several awards. 4 years, we were on the Inc. 5,000 fastest growing private companies.
I know that's a tough one.
Tongue twister. Winner of the 2024 Acquisition International Best Global M&A Advisory Firms. And there's a few others. I think they're in a secure vault right now. What it comes down to is we know how to anticipate the problems, those bumps in the road, how to overcome them, and we become the shock absorbers.
We walk our clients through a once-in-a-lifetime experience, along the way helping them extract their wealth and transition their legacy. There are typically many problems that occur with great highs and lows, and it's such an important and gratifying feeling. And it's why we're so passionate about what we do.
Plus, we get to collect these war stories, which brings us to today. We're going to cover what happens after going to market and before closing. We call it how deals get stuck in first gear. It's not always a smooth ride. It's like finally taking that cross-country trip that you've been dreaming about forever, pulling the top down, watching the sun, feeling the wind, and then finding out you got mechanical problems along the way, and there's no service center.
Good example.
Let's get started with the first segment, Jason.
All right, we're calling this episode How Deals Get Stuck. It's about challenges that occur between going to market and closing the sale. In this first segment, why and when seller's fatigue sets in, and it usually does, will get you thinking about how to build up that memory muscle.
And in the second segment, we're going to cover something we call all buyers are liars. And we say this with utmost respect, always behind their backs, never to their faces, of course, and mostly just kidding. But this point is very important.
The third segment we're going to cover is why due diligence can be a nightmare. Even if you think you're well prepared, and even if you think you've seen it all, like we have.
It's like going to that favorite movie, watching it again, and still being shocked. You never saw it coming, even though you did. It's really hard to anticipate.
And here's the first segment in today's episode, how deals get stuck in first gear. It's called seller's fatigue.
Seller's fatigue. Does that mean the seller is tired of the business? Do they need to take a nap?
No, seller's fatigue is when the seller gets exhausted from the selling process. Selling a business can be a marathon, and we always tell our clients to pace themselves. It's that inevitable feeling of exhaustion when sellers find out that selling is not like buying a bag of chips. It's not simple, that they're ready to leave the business for sure, but they're also very much in the game of keeping their business running. It adds a whole layer of effort on top of what they're already doing. You don't know how long it's going to take to sell the business, and the business has to remain viable.
In fact, it's essential the business be, quote, in normal working conditions, unquote. Not only must the business be maintained as usual, it also has to be presentable. It's like staging a home. The business must look good the entire time.
Yeah, Joe, that's a very important point. We always encourage our business owners to run the business as if it won't be sold.
Seller's fatigue is that other layer of fatigue while trying to sell their business. It's like having two jobs. One is running the business and the other is selling the business.
It's sometimes the case that sellers are not actively working in the biz and they are less involved and play more of a remote manager, but most are engaged one degree or another. It's our job to take as much off their plate as possible. When they get involved, we do our best to minimize it.
In most cases, we set a sales price, we go to market, talk to buyers, which we covered in the last episode, and then we follow a typical process. First, we vet the buyer. We want to know things about them. Are they real humans, for example? Are they sincere? Are they fundable? Will a bank or some other lending institution be there to finance them? Are they a competitor? Everybody signs an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement. But if they're a direct competitor, we have to be especially careful. So after that, we present what's called an offering memorandum. This is a highly detailed and confidential document that covers many aspects of the business so that the buyer gets familiar with it enough to decide if they want to move forward, including financials, including information about customers, etc. This really gives the buyers the first opportunity to say no, thank you. And that's a good thing.
Well, why wouldn't you want everyone to ask for more info, Joe? Don't you want everyone to want to buy the business?
No, actually, it's not like selling a watch. There has to be a good fit. And the sooner we get to that answer no, then we're not wasting anybody's time. We really need to focus on the matches. When an interested buyer reviews the offering memorandum and starts asking more questions, some of those I can, and some of them I can't. I really need to learn more about the business as we go along. But at some point, hopefully sooner than later, the real prospects will want to meet with the seller. Typically, it's on a Zoom call and it's not overproduced like this webcast. Then for the sellers, when they're in the starting process, it's incredibly fun. It's very exciting. It's their first interview and they're convinced that this is the buyer.
Joe, how do you prepare the seller for their first interview? How do sellers get prepared to meet with buyers? What if they say the wrong things?
And they do. In the long run, it's important that they be herself or himself. It's not acting. Ultimately, we want both parties to get to know each other. But in the short run, it's like dating. You have to be on your best behavior. As I noted earlier, the business has to be running on all cylinders.
It's important to note that we are trying to get more than one buyer to the table at the same time. So our famous saying at IEG is one buyer's like no buyers. It comes into play really right here at this part of the process.
One buyer is like no buyers. We actually talked about that a little bit in the last episode. Behind the scenes, we're actively talking to more than one buyer. We're weeding out the bad fits. We're trying to move others along. It's like getting all the kids organized and leaving the playground at the same time. It seems organized, but it's actually chaotic.
What's the story that goes along with this episode, Joe?
In this one, we're representing a social services clinic. It's owned by a single individual, and she started it about 20 years ago. Over that time, she's built up this organization into a few clinics, and there are a number of providers within it. She's got a large base of recurring clients. It's clearly a well-run business. There are no billing issues and seamless customer interaction. They have tremendous growth opportunity. At the same time, all of the facilities have similar branding, and that's really important. It's a great business model that can definitely scale, and it's all working quite well. The seller, my client, has a great team, has an operations manager, and she gets involved with major contracts, obviously larger issues, but for the most part, she's out of the daily activity. She's done what she can with the business, and now she believes that another buyer would have more opportunity to grow the business than she can. They've got more energy, they have more capabilities, more knowledge to expand. So for her, it's been a long ride, and she's ready for retirement.
She's built a lot of value into the company, it sounds like. It's always so incredible to help people who have grown their own business and be able to extract their value.
Yeah, it is always amazing to see. And she's in the perfect spot, in my opinion. The biz is generating a nice income. There's a healthy adjusted EBITDA. There's a great size business here for both individuals and strategics. So we go to market. Over the course of just a few short weeks, we have 5 buyers all interested.
5 buyers so quickly, is that unusual?
Yeah, but it's really hard to predict. In this case, I really didn't anticipate as many. I was obviously very happy with the response. They were all qualified, ready for introductions. I may also add that before these interviews, I was fielding questions left and right. I was clearly not the expert yet, so specific questions needed to be answered between me and the seller, my client, as soon as possible.
It brings up a point. We don't specialize in any particular industry. We're industry agnostic for very intentional reasons. So how can you represent a company in a field that you may not have represented before?
For the same reasons that one of our clients comes to us in the first place, because they don't have the experience of M&A and they need a guide. They're the technical experts in their business, and we learn it along the way. We know M&A inside and out. We know the right questions to ask, and that allows us to guide them through each step of the process. We've had success across about every industry segment. This is a good example of how their expertise aligns with ours. My client's technological prowess comes into play, and of course, we're in the backgrounds to make sure that everything runs smoothly.
How did you prepare her for the first interview?
By saying very little, actually.
Why is that?
I described the basic structure of the interview. There would be introductions, and the buyer would talk about his background, and then I told her to be ready to talk about herself a little bit, the history of the company, and then how is it doing today, but definitely to reserve most of the time for question and answers.
The point of the first call is really to allow them to meet, but primarily for buyers to ask more questions. Is that the goal, Joe, usually?
Usually there's a lot more than Q&A going on in the background. Both parties are sizing each other up. I'm sizing up the buyer, and everybody's getting these vibes. But keep in mind, it's her very first interview, and she's very excited.
Well, of course, she thinks that she's about to sell her business, and this is going to be the buyer, right? All in one shot, one and done.
This is the time. Everybody's on stage performing. Everybody's the star of the show, and the business is the story. It's really not unusual for a seller to want to talk more about their business than is necessary. And this is exactly how this one goes.
And it's also very important for the seller to be listening to the buyer.
Well, that is so true. And that's just part of the point. In this first interview, I'm listening very closely to both of the parties to get the vibes. In this case, she was so excited to talk, and the buyer was definitely genuine, very interested, but a half hour goes by, and then we finally get into Q&A.
And why didn't you say anything?
It wouldn't have helped. This is really part of the process, and it allows the seller, our client, to really practice and see how it unfolds.
And how did the call end up going?
It went quickly that hour. The buyer ended up asking many more questions than could be answered, and we didn't have enough time to get through it. It turns out that a few weeks later, this particular buyer made an offer.
Like a one and done, right?
No, it was just the beginning. After the call, I had a debrief with her, told her she did fine, thought the buyer was very interested, but I cautioned her part of this process was for her to evaluate the buyer and to focus on the buyer's questions. If you're always talking, you can't be listening. So it has to be less on the story. And lastly, I warned her she was going to get very, very tired very quickly, and that she needed to realize that this will be a repeat performance.
Was that hard to talk about? Did she seem to understand that?
Yeah, our clients are A types, right?
Sellers generally are A-type to begin with. They've grown their own business, many from the ground up, and led it successfully over many years to the point where it's ready to be sold. So they're usually very strong personalities, and they are not used to being critiqued. So I see where you're headed, Joe. You lined up several more interviews, and after the second or third, you started to see the exhaustion set in. And that's when the seller realizes that she may have to go through this many more times, that it could get time consuming, very repetitive and boring.
And that is the beginning of seller's fatigue. They have to experience it to understand it, which is why telling them in advance is really not going to change anything. They have to really absorb it. By letting them find out for themselves that it's more of a journey than a quick transaction, they get to feeling it very quickly.
This is just one small example of what might cause a seller to get fatigued. There are many more steps where the seller will need more energy, and they want us to take a lot of the work off as possible.
Right. There's many points up to close where the client will need lots of energy. Essentially, seller's fatigue is when the seller gets tired of the selling process. It's our job to be aware of this so that we can help them preserve this energy for the bumps that we can't always anticipate. Jason, let's go on to the next segment.
Now, what are we going to talk about, Joe?
All buyers are liars.
Joe, are all buyers liars? Seriously?
No, of course not. We named it that because we knew it would get some attention. However, there's a really strong moral behind this. We thought it would be very interesting, and it's very important.
We could have easily called this verify first or trust later or measure 3 times before you sign the deal.
But we chose all buyers are liars to make the same point. What it means is that as much as a buyer and seller want to transact and want to believe in each other, both have very different agendas. And at times, this can cause friction.
It means that you can't always take on face value what a buyer has to say. It's our job to make sure buyers has the qualifications and experience required for running the business. We know what the SBA requirements are. We know what to look for and determine any conflicts of interest. Are they a close competitor, for instance? Do they know any of the same vendors or clients? We got to confirm the fundability of the buyer, meaning do they have the ability to get a bank loan? Do they have what is called proof of funds?
It's really crucial, this buyer relationship with the seller. We need to establish one, a really good one from the start to gain their trust and confidence, because there's a delicate balance between verifying what a buyer has to say and being too invasive up front. So we have to get off to a good start.
And buyers may claim they have financing in place, when in actuality it isn't very solid. They may claim a great resume, when in actuality it is a bit beefed up. They may claim they have every intention of moving their family to a new city, when they really have not made a decision to buy the business in the first place. It's not possible for us to know all these things up front, is it?
No. Here's a quick story, and it fits nicely into this concept of all buyers are liars. Our client is an electrical contract for businesses. They provide electrical contracting services. They have hundreds of maintenance agreements, property management companies, manufacturer, industrial clients, you name it. He knew there was going to be great interest on the market. It's a business-to-business service with high recurring revenues, and in this industry segment, it was hot and in demand. We prepared an in-depth evaluation of the business. We also prepared the comprehensive offering memorandum, and then we prepared this thing called a teaser for market.
A teaser is an industry term for business listing. Think of it as an advertisement for a business with key metrics and an executive summary. And it's important to note that a teaser is public and that it can't tie back to the company. So it's describing the company, but not really identifying it.
Within days, we have a lot of interest. Each day for 2 months, we're getting a couple of prospects every day They're coming out of the woodworks. Right out of the gate, I start setting up interviews.
And seller fatigue sets in quickly.
In this case, the sellers were quite resilient and ready. It was a husband and wife. Made a great team and they had a lot of energy. Anyways, by getting these offers so quickly, we needed to get the buyer prospect process organized with a tight timeline, good structure for the interviews.
There are many occasions when we will anticipate this up front and proceed with a very structured buying schedule. In this case, we wanted to determine first the market interest because it was not one of our larger clients.
To compact a long story, we narrowed the field, we interviewed, we took offers, and then we selected one buyer.
And this is when the all buyers are liars problem began, right?
Exactly. They were in the business, our buyer, of buying businesses and running them each separately. And what they did is they hired what they called general managers or operators, or at least that's how they communicated to us. The operators would come in and run the business, and it seemed reasonable. They had shown us businesses in their portfolio, and it appeared to be a perfect fit.
And the price was right?
Yeah, it was slightly above the asking price. We ended up signing an LOI.
Letter of intent?
Right. That initial agreement that gets us started into the next stages. It's more like a strong handshake and it's rarely binding. But we ended up taking the listing off the market. And then we headed into the due diligence phase.
Okay, so how does this fit into our title, All Buyers Are Liars?
Because in this case, they were not the operator. It turns out they weren't even going to hire somebody. They were going to find somebody to buy the business. They were acting more like a search fund. And that's when they look for another buyer.
How did you not know this in advance?
There are two things. The first is the LOI identified this buying group, which turned out to be an investment group, as the buyer. And secondly, they brought in an operator very quickly. This person had every intention of buying. There's really no reason for me to be suspicious. After a month, that person had to pull out due to family problems. The investment group did not have another operator behind the wall. We were now months into it, and that is when I finally learned the truth, that they were not the actual buyers, but they were a search fund. It's complicated because the LOI language allowed them to assign the purchase to an affiliate, and that's quite common. But in this case, the affiliate was a separate legal entity that they called the operator.
Well, technically, isn't that lying?
I'm going to leave that one to the attorneys. I will say there really wasn't any reason for them not to disclose this, because had we known it, we may still have pursued it. The offer was very solid. We were able to demonstrate that they had the funding, but we would have proceeded much differently.
So after their operator pulled out for family reasons, what happened next?
We gave them an opportunity to find another operator because we were so far into it. We now had 3 months. We'd put all the due diligence together. Plus, the sellers didn't want to start over. After 2 more months, we were not able to bring in another operator. Essentially, we lost almost a half a year.
And what happened then? Did you have to start over anyway?
There were two things that are relevant here. One, the due diligence was already completed, and that can be a nightmare. It's a huge amount of work, but having that done allowed us to be very nimble, if you will, because the data was already there. And two, we knew how to structure the selling process for the next phase. It was well organized. Within 3 weeks, we had 6 offers, all of them over 20% of our original listing price. And within 6 weeks, we signed an LOI. And then 90 days later, we closed.
Sounds like a win.
Only in retrospect. When you're going through it in the moment and finding out in real time that the buyers didn't disclose everything, that's not fun. That's very stressful.
And it is important to state that most buyers are straightforward, honest, and very sincere. We also don't go into every deal thinking we're going to be lied to at every corner, and that there are many LOI protections that can be put into place to help mitigate these kind of problems.
Right. But we do know that we haven't seen everything yet, and to keep our eyes wide open, very open. So let's rename the title of this segment. It really shouldn't be All Buyers Are Liars. How about Full Disclosure is Required for Entry?
Wow, we've seller fatigue going on. They are fading away. We have buyers who are lying left and right. So what else could possibly go wrong, Joe?
It turns out plenty. By the way, plenty does go right as well, and it often does, but we're here to talk about the bumps, not to glorify how great it is.
This is about the tough stuff that goes along with selling a business, which brings us to our last segment, the due diligence nightmare.
Well, that sounds scary. Tell us about due diligence.
Sure. So due diligence in M&A is like dating before marriage between the buyer and seller. When one company wants to buy another, they can't just shake hands and exchange keys like buying a used car. Instead, they need to perform due diligence, essentially kicking the tires, looking under the hood, and checking to see if there are bodies buried in the backyard. The buyer will scrutinize the books to make sure the numbers aren't fictional, examine the legal history to ensure no sketchy contracts can blow up later. So they may evaluate the company's systems and processes to ensure they actually work or if they're held together with duct tape and so on. So due diligence is very much part of the process.
It protects the buyer from any nasty surprises they'll find after the purchase. It may be the difference between the buyer buying a profitable company or one that has lead in the land after an EPA study like I had. It really did happen. So despite all this careful due diligence investigation, plenty of deals still end up failing spectacularly.
Sometimes the due diligence process itself becomes so expensive and time consuming that companies feel pressure to complete the deal just to justify the costs. Larger deals have a very complex due diligence process.
Think about it as corporate archaeology. You're digging through layers of history, hoping you don't unearth anything that'll curse the deal.
And Joe, I know you have the perfect example of one.
Yeah, unfortunately. My client was a food manufacturer on the East Coast. The company produced products for major retail outlets. You can think of big box outlets like Costco, but that's not one. The buyer was from Belgium, who also made similar products, and they wanted to gain entry to the US, and they ended up making a very attractive offer. This buyer was a large organization. They were generating hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and my client was smaller, generating about 20 million a year. What that typically means is that the buyer has higher degree of leverage. They have a larger team versus a smaller team for due diligence and negotiating and attorneys, et cetera. In this case, it was 10 of them against 2 of us, and the price tag was over 30 million. So the buyer had every right to take a deep dive into the numbers for due diligence.
I remember this. It happened right during the COVID breakout, and our client was considered an essential service.
Right during the Christmas season. They had to keep production running, and employees were calling in sick left and right, and the buyer could care less.
On top of all of this, there was a breakup fee.
Explain what a breakup fee is, Jason.
A breakup fee is like relationship insurance. It's money one party has to pay if they get cold feet and walk away from the deal after signing the letter of intent, like a wedding deposit. If the seller suddenly decides they'd rather not sell the business to the buyer through no fault of the buyer, the seller would then owe the breakup fee to the buyer as compensation for time, effort, and opportunity costs. Essentially, a breakup fee is designed to keep everyone honest and committed once they've shaken hands, because nothing says I'm serious quite like putting real money on the line.
The fee serves as both a deterrent to deal jumping, and it's a small consolation prize if this corporate romance inevitably falls apart.
Virtually in all small business transactions, there's no breakup fee. In fact, many buyers even pay the seller to take the listing off the market for what we call exclusivity. So in this case, the breakup fee was $100,000 because the buyer was investing a significant amount of time and money into due diligence, and the seller was about to make a ton of money, over 30 million. So the wedding story continued.
They gave us a due diligence list that was like a spreadsheet. It was, I kid you not, 346 line items that they wanted completed within a few weeks. And some of those line items required multiple activities. They had them broken into major categories like organization, human resources, legal, financial, assets, environmental, information technology. It just went on.
Yeah, and that's pretty common for a deal of this size.
Due diligence is standard, but not this list. I could tell that it came from the internet. It was just obesely large. And every item the buyer would want to know, without regard to this industry, it was a broad shotgun approach. It was not customized for them, and some of those requirements were just unnecessary. The one I remember the most was the single line item for a picture of the time punch clock for hourly employees. That's where you check in with that, in this case, piece of paper, in and out for work so that they can monitor your hours. And my client was livid. Here they were in the middle of a pandemic, needing to fulfill orders to keep up with huge demands from the largest retail outlets in the country. And the buyer was demanding a photo of the punch clock.
You took the picture, right?
Actually, I talked with the buyer's lead on the team, the one of the 10, trying to get them to pare it down and to get rid of some of the clutter because our client was under extreme pressure and upset.
And what did the buyers say?
No. Basically, they said no and that we had to comply. To this day, I still don't get it. Why they didn't see they were being bullies and that they were damaging a really essential relationship. I don't get it.
Then what happened?
Recall that the breakup fee was $100,000 and that the client then figured that as long as he complied with due diligence, he would be in full compliance with the agreement and that the breakup fee wouldn't apply. He worked around the clock to complete the due diligence. A couple of days before Christmas, we finished the due diligence and everyone agreed that it was done.
So you made it. The engagement went through and they got married, or what?
Actually, that's when my seller broke off the engagement. As soon as the due diligence was done, he called off the deal. He didn't want to sell to them, and he just basically told them to go away, not so politely.
Seller made a commitment to due diligence and then made his best efforts to complete it, but it wasn't the right fit, apparently, so they broke it off.
It didn't end there. Unfortunately, the company from Belgium was not happy. That's understandable. They felt like my seller didn't act in good faith and led them on and really had no intention of selling, which was not true. So the buyer ended up taking them to court and they won not only a judgment for $100,000, they also won judgment for their attorney fees, which was over $40,000. And that was a real due diligence nightmare.
Wow. That is sad and unusual. It's very important for our audience to understand that it's not typical for any deal to blow up like this. Most small business deals don't include breakup fees. Most buyers are not bullies, and most buyers and sellers actually do get married.
This is just one of those remarkable stories that we like to tell in our war room, and honestly, this one was not embellished.
But it does aptly describe this topic that we call the due diligence nightmare.
Jason, let's review the key takeaways.
Number one is seller's fatigue. It's a real thing, and some subtle coaching and guidance will go a long way to preparing sellers for what can be a long, bumpy ride.
2, all buyers are liars, but not always. The moral of the story is to be on the lookout and not to fall in love too fast. It's a really long engagement.
And number 3, due diligence can be a nightmare. Due diligence is a necessary bump in the road to the successful sale of the business. Be prepared and work with the buyer on smoothing out the road.
Our next episode is called Why Deals Always Die. You don't want to miss it. We have this saying that all deals have to die 3 times before they close. Sometimes they're on life support, sometimes they're on flatline, but mostly they come back to life. They are definitely heart-stopping, and you don't want to miss it. So here are the 3 things we suggest. First, have a meeting with us. If you want a one-on-one, just go to our Calendly page or email us or call. And please let us know you heard about us here. We're real people and we promise not to do all the talking. Second, please visit our YouTube channel. We have episode 1 up. We've got a lot of other information there. Please like and subscribe. It would mean a lot to us. And third, please pass this on to others you think might benefit from it. It'll help us justify telling you all this stuff.
Okay, that all said, we have time for some questions. If there's always these problems that you describe selling a business, why would you do this for a job? It sounds horrible.
It is horrible, but the joy and the excitement of seeing a seller after building their business for decades and being really proud of this child and watching them go through this once-in-a-lifetime experience where they're able to extract their wealth and transition their legacy does sound corny, but it's what's most gratifying, and it's why I continue to go through these horrible aspects of it. Let me ask you a question. What's the smallest size deal on average we work with?
The smallest would be around $1 million, end up from there. But we don't usually work with anything under $1 million, but we're looking at profitable businesses that have been around a while, at least 5 years.
Do we provide legal counsel and other professional services? We have relationships with high quality strategic partners. We will provide as much guidance as we can along the way, but there are other services that go along with transactions, and we bring to the table very high quality, experienced players.
Look, think of us as like quarterback in the transaction. We work with the CPAs, the attorneys to help get the deals done.
We never just abandon it. We will quarterback it. One more question here. This leads us into the next episode where deals always die. The question here is, if a deal dies, does that mean it's done? Can it be resurrected?
They don't usually technically die. It just appears they went to sleep, but they usually end up waking up, and part of the deal maker's job is to help keep the deal on track and get over those bumps in the road.
Oftentimes it's that current prospect where it may hit a dead end. Sometimes it doesn't. You get around it. But then we find the next one. And if you find the right buyer, magic can happen.
That's totally true.
This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. We look forward to our next one called Why Deals Always Die. We'll see you next time.